Part 47. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 461. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Liu was also full of joy. At this moment, Beihu saw the scene and took the opportunity to say, "What about me? Master, what about me?" After Lin Yu heard Beihu's voice, 3 black lines appeared on his forehead, and he was speechless. "You should wait until you get to a place with abundant spiritual power, and then summon you when there is a battle. If you are summoned, I am afraid that nearly 70% of my spiritual power will be consumed." At this time, Beihu heard what Lin Yu said, and he wanted to cry but had no tears. The corners of his mouth even raised a few bitter smiles, and his eyes and eyebrows were full of helplessness. "I didn't expect that this high level of cultivation is not a good thing. These are all small shrimps. Alas, it seems that I can't get out for a while." When Beihu said this, he sighed heavily. After Lin Yu heard what Beihu said, he coughed softly. "Ahem, that's not necessarily true. This place is full of dangers. For example, we just encountered an epic beast. Who knows when we can encounter the chaos art? You still have a chance." After hearing what Lin Yu said, Beihu's eyes were full of helplessness. "I know you are just comforting me, but I'm used to it. Anyway, I can't get out." "Woo woo." Lin Yu saw Beihu acting like a spoiled child there. Look, just felt a burst of nausea. At this time, his eyes flashed a bit of helplessness. Okay, forget it." Beihu's face sank slightly, and then he said in a deep voice, "I believe what you said. I feel that it won't take long before you have to send me to the field." After Lin Yu heard Beihu say this, he was like a monk who was at a loss, confused, and his eyes and eyebrows flashed a bit of confusion, and his face was slightly condensed at that time. "Why do you say that?" "Master, there seems to be a very scary guy in front, who is gradually awakening his power. The guy's power is very scary, probably comparable to Beihu's peak period." Beihu seemed to be able to hear Arya's voice. At this time, he also raised a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, and a bit of playfulness flashed in his eyes. "I guess you must have heard that voice now. Now you can understand why I said that." 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead, and he was speechless in his heart. It's so abominable. What on earth is in front? Damn it. I don't know, but it seems to be something similar to this corpse beast, but the thing in front is obviously much more terrifying than this corpse beast, so I still hope that the master can be more careful. Lin Yu nodded slightly. "Forget it, no matter what, I will go and see who is in front today, who can make such a big noise." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he immediately took off into the air and rushed straight forward. His speed was incredibly fast. At this time, when Su Wan'er and Su Yang first entered the village, they saw countless corpses. The corpses were wearing armor, but the armor was already in tatters, and their flesh and blood had been completely corroded, leaving only a few dried internal organs. These corpses seemed to have no consciousness, and their movements were very mechanical, as if they were following the route set by people, without any deviation, but they would not pay attention to other places. Su Yang and Su Wan'er looked at each other, with a bit of solemnity in their eyes and eyebrows. At this time, they frowned slightly. These guys seem to be controlled by someone, and they seem a bit strange. I don't know what's going on. At this time, Su Yang couldn't help but frown slightly after seeing this scene, and then turned his head and looked at Su Wan'er. A bit of solemnity flashed in his eyes, and a bit of bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. There are indeed some problems. The two of us should be careful, but the gentleman seems to have said so just now. After Su Wan'er heard Su Yang say this, she also raised her eyebrows slightly, and then turned her head and looked at Su Yang, with a little confusion in her eyes. What did the gentleman say just now? Su Yang just smiled. The gentleman said that everything is determined by our hearts, and everything starts from nothing. When we are in the right position, we should be afraid of the world. When we should not be afraid, there is nothing in the world, and we should destroy it. After Suwanner heard Su Yang say this, she half closed her eyes, and then she looked thoughtful. After a moment, she nodded slightly. I seem to understand a little, but I don't seem to understand it very well. Little beauty, what do you understand? What don't you understand? A voice suddenly sounded from behind Suwanner. At this time, Su Yang and Suwanner suddenly turned around and saw an ugly and evil face. When they saw this ugly and evil face, their faces suddenly became ugly. At this time, Su Yang suddenly summoned his Tao beast, which now basically has the strength of an epic beast. At this time, the Tao beast opened its bloody mouth and bit the monster directly. At this time, the monster suddenly disappeared in front of them, and appeared behind them again in the next second. The monster raised its palms and pushed them out at the back of the two of them. Su Yang and Suwanner were directly knocked away by the monster's palm, and finally fell heavily to the ground, and their breath was extremely weak. At this time, Su Yang and Suwanner's faces suddenly condensed, and they forcibly suppressed the blood in their chests. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 462. At this time, the two of them could clearly see the appearance of the monster. The whole body of the monster had completely turned into white bones, but there was a faint jade quality on the white bones, which was just like Mo Kui's state. The white eyebrows on the head of this corpse general are very obvious, and they have not been eroded by the years at all, so this corpse general is also called the white eyebrow corpse general. Su Yang and Su Wanner's eyes were fixed directly on the white-browed mason, and there was a certain solemnity between their eyebrows. At this moment, Su Yang and Su Wanner were staring at the white-browed corpse general with their eyes filled with a gloomy look. After seeing the two of them like this, the corpse general with white eyebrows also had a vague smile on his lips, and there was a complete mockery in the corners of his eyes and brows. Little guy, I see that you two are not weak in strength, but even so, what can you do? You can't do anything to me, so just suffer death. If you are good enough, maybe I can be in a good mood and give you your in for a treat. After the white-browed corpse general said this, he also laughed like this. At this time, Su Yang and Su Wanner suddenly took a step forward, their eyes fixed on the white-browed corpse general, and a sense of killing came from the two people's eyes. It emanates from the body like this. You want the two of us to surrender to you? What kind of joke are you talking about? It's simply ridiculous. The white-browed corpse general heard this. After Su Yang said this, he turned his head and stared directly at Su Yang. The sneer at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious. Really? If you really want to fight to the end regardless of the heaven and earth, I won't be able to help you, just don't regret it. After the white-browed corpse general finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward, and then came to Su Yang's body. He grabbed Su Yang's neck. At that time, Su Yang's Dao beast didn't even have time to react. After the Chunyang Dao beast reacted at this time, after he saw his master being controlled by someone, he suddenly rushed towards the white-browed stonemason without saying a word. The Chunyang Dao beast, the speed of the beast was extremely fast, and it was already in front of the white-browed corpse general in just one breath. The Chunyang Taoist beast opened its bloody mouth, and suddenly bit the white-browed corpse directly. At this time, after seeing this scene, the white-browed corpse just turned around suddenly, and then quickly a bit of gloomy murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Immediately afterwards, such a mass of black energy emitted from his body, and that mass of black energy directly enveloped the pure Yang Dao beast. Because he had just summoned the Dao beast in his body, he summoned the sword hand in his body. As an adult, Su Yang at this time was not proficient at controlling the pure Yang Dao beast. The pure Yang Dao beast was actually controlled for a moment. And at this time, Suwaner also suddenly summoned the Tau beast in her body. The Tau beast in Suwaner's body was the Swanyan beast. This Swanyan beast contained the 9-turn mysterious yin water, and the 9-turn mysterious yin water can dissolve all the evil spirits in the world. At this time, this piece of news suddenly appeared in Suwaner's mind. A bit of excitement flashed in the corner of Suwaner's eyes and eyebrows, and the smile on the corner of her mouth became more and more obvious. Got up. 9-turn Swanyan water, this may be the nemesis of this damn monster. When Suwaner thought of this, her mind suddenly moved, and then the 9-turn mysterious yin water suddenly rushed towards the white-browed corpse. The white-browed corpse general seemed to be a little wary of the 9-turn Swanyan water, so Hu Bian suddenly stood up and retreated, rushing behind him at such a crazy speed. The speed of the white-browed corpse general was extremely fast. In an instant, he retreated more than 10 feet. The 9-turn mysterious yin water was sprinkled all over the ground on the heads of the skeleton soldiers, and then he saw this: the skeleton soldiers actually started to emit clouds of black energy, and then fell apart on the spot. It looked a bit strange. After seeing this scene, Suwaner's eyes were full of excitement. After Su Yang saw this scene, his heart was full of surprise. The surprise in his heart was beyond words. No way, sister, you are too powerful. At this time, Bai Mei's control over Su Yang weakened instantly. At this time, a sentence suddenly appeared in Su Yang's mind. The pure Yang Dao beast's body contains pure Yang true fire, and the pure Yang true fire can burn all kinds of evil spirits in the world. Yes, the smile at the corner of Su Yang's mouth began to become more and more obvious. His eyes were fixed directly on the white-browed corpse general, and something flashed in the corner of his eye. A gloomy meaning. Damn it, you just have to die this time. After Su Yang finished speaking, he shouted angrily, "Pure Yang true fire, come out." Su Yang's voice had just fallen, and then a ball of fire suddenly appeared on the body of Chun Yang, and the ball of fire directly burned the black gas to ashes. At this time, the monster's eyes and eyebrows were full of disbelief. The eyes of the white eyebrow corpse general were staring straight at the two brothers and sisters, and his eyes and eyebrows were full of surprise. At this moment, the white eyebrow corpse general's eyebrows seemed to be twisted together. How is it possible? How could the strength of the two of you be so terrifying? This is absolutely impossible, this is absolutely impossible. At this time, the white eyebrow corpse general was even a little hysterical. At this moment, Su Yang also took the opportunity to break free from the white eyebrow corpse general's restraints, and then he suddenly pulled back and retreated to the back, so he took a few steps back, his eyes were fixed on the white eyebrow corpse general. However, this white-browed corpse general was naturally not so easy to deal with. He half narrowed his eyes and looked at the two of them. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then he shook his head casually. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 463. At this time, in Longguo, a young man was walking with a big-bellied guy. The young man had an object in his hand, which was like a jade ring. The young man played with it carefully, but the spiritual power emanating from it was simply terrifying. At this time, there was a 100-year-old ginseng on the stage. Although this ginseng was not a special existence in the world of immortal cultivation, it was indeed a miraculous medicine that could bring the dead back to life in the eyes of ordinary people. I'll pay 1.5 million. Everyone knew Zhao Donglei's identity, so naturally no one dared to compete with Zhao Donglei for this thing. 1.5 million for the first time. 1.5 million for the second time. 150. 1.51 million. A very arrogant and domineering voice suddenly sounded at the door, and then the field was instantly silent, and everyone looked at that person one after another. A man wearing a white suit, a tie, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses walked slowly from the door. This man has very small eyes, and it seems that he can't open them normally. Zhao Donglei was furious when he saw this man. Chu Tianj, I haven't seen you for so many days, I thought you were dead. Chu Tianj just smiled, you are not dead, how could I die? At this time, Bai Chen looked at Chu Tianj, and then shook his head slightly, you are really dying. Zhao Donglei heard Bai Chen and laughed loudly, ha ha ha, did you hear what my little brother said, you are dying. Chu Tianj's face was gloomy as if water was about to drip out. Boy, dare you tell me your name? I'll show you who will die first. Bai Chen spread his hands, you have been feeling stuffy in your chest at midnight recently, and the Tianyuan and Huiguan points are painful as if they were pricked by needles. You must have had a lot of super friendly relationships with women recently. After hearing what Bai Chen said, Chu Tianj's face was gloomy as if water was about to drip out. Boy, I warn you, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Don't you know whether it's nonsense or not? Everyone present was stunned when they saw Bai Chen dared to talk to Chu Tianj like this. They didn't know Bai Chen's background, but they knew Chu Tianj's background very well. Zhao Donglei was indeed the richest man in Jiangnan, and Chu Tianj was the son of the richest man in Lingnan, and the first heir. It was rumored that the two had fought over the top card of a club a few years ago. In the end, they even reached the point of being irreconcilable. The two people can be said to be mortal enemies, but because the two people stood at the same height, Bai Chen and the others had never met. Chu Tianj's eyes were fixed on Bai Chen, don't think that I will believe you if you make up a few nonsense words. Bai Chen spread his hands, qi and blood are insufficient, you may not live long, believe it or not. After seeing this scene, Chu Ye on the side was also very impressed with Bai Chen in his heart. This buddy is awesome, he dared to challenge Chu Tianj directly, amazing, too amazing. Okay, I'll give you a week. If I can't die within a week, then that will be your death date. After Chu Tianj finished speaking, he sat directly in the first row. No matter how much money that fat guy offers, I have 10,000 more than him. Zhao Donglei was so angry that his chest rose and fell violently. It's not that he didn't have money to compete with this guy, but there was something he wanted very much behind this auction. Bai Chen just shook his head when he saw Zhao Donglei like this. This is just a carrot. You can probably buy dozens of cars with more than 1 million. Bai Chen said this quietly. After Zhao Donglei heard what Bai Chen said, his eyes lit up, Sir, are you serious? Bai Chen just shook his head, and then whispered a few words to Zhao Donglei. At this time, Zhao Donglei raised the price to 2 million in one breath. Although Chu Tianj also knew that this thing was not worth 2 million, the words just now had been said. If he didn't do it, he would inevitably be criticized. 2,100,000. After Chu Tianj shouted the price, he looked at Zhao Donglei provocatively. The host on the stage was also happy to see the two sides fighting here. Zhao Donglei just smiled, he's just a junior, I'll give it to him. 2,100,000 for the first time. 2,100,000 for the second time. 2,100,000 for the third time. Deal. As the hammer sounded, Zhao Donglei stood up. Mr. Chu is really generous. He spent more than 2 million to buy a big white radish. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Chu Tianj just glanced at Zhao Donglei with disdain, if someone has no money, then he has no money. Don't wait until they bid for something and then be jealous. Zhao Donglei just smiled, if you don't believe me, how about we make a bet? What's the bet? Zhao Donglei glanced at Bai Chen, my little brother has just arrived and has no place to live. But I heard that Mr. Chu seems to have a #1 villa in Jiangnan residence. Chu Tianj waved his hand and said, okay, if I lose, the villa belongs to you, but what if you lose? I will give you a building in the newly developed Jiangnan Misty Rain. Everyone knows that Zhao Donglei is generous, but they didn't expect that Zhao Donglei would be so generous. However, in addition to being shocked, everyone's eyes began to focus on Bai Chen. After all, this time Zhao Donglei was betting on the villa for Bai Chen. After Chu Tianj swiped the card, he took out the ginseng directly. Open your dog eyes and take a good look to see if this is the same as you said. Zhao Donglei followed Bai Chen's instructions and asked his secretary to get a basin of water and add some drugs that can dissolve glue. Then, right after Zhao Donglei, others threw the so-called old mountain ginseng into the basin. After less than a quarter of an hour, all the whiskers on the old ginseng floated up. At this time, everyone saw the scene and their faces were full of shock and disbelief. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Chang. Chapter 464. Chu Tianj's face turned pale for a while. At this time, he kicked the basin over, then put his hands in his pockets and left directly. And at this moment, Mr. Jia, who was sitting next to Bai Chen, was shocked beyond measure, and his admiration for Bai Chen was as continuous as the surging river. Sir, you are really amazing. Just by looking at it a few times, you can tell that this is not a real old wild ginseng. Your eyesight is really amazing. After Bai Chen heard Master Jia say this, he just scratched his head and smiled. Hey, this thing is different from the ones I have at home. You can tell it's fake at a glance. Master Jia heard this, and after Bai Chen said this, a wave of panic arose in his heart. How many old wild ginsengs like this do you have in your home? Bai Chen just shook his head. There is no such old wild ginseng. At this time, Mr. Jia just felt that Bai Chen might have been joking with him just now. Yes, century-old wild ginseng like this is indeed rare. But before Mr. Jia finished speaking, he heard Bai Chen say, the ones in my house usually start from 1,000-year age, such as 1,000-year-old snow ganoderma and 1,000-year-old mountain ginseng. However, there are not many 1,000-year-old ones, but most of them are 10,000-year-old ones. At this time, Mr. Jia's eyes were so wide that he looked like they were about to pop out of his sockets. I don't know, sir, if you have time, take me there someday, Chan Jun. Bai Chen nodded. It will be fine after the auction is over, but my house is a bit rough. The auction went on in an orderly manner. And at this moment, a woman's phone call suddenly came in directly. Bai Chen took a look at the caller ID and couldn't help but frown slightly, and his face began to look slightly ugly. After seeing this scene, Mr. Jia and Zhao Donglei beside him also had a bit of confusion in their eyes. What's wrong, sir? If you have something to do, you can go and do it first. Bai Chen nodded lightly and smiled. There is indeed a call. I'll answer the call first and I'll be back soon. After Bai Chen finished speaking, he got up and went to the toilet. After he arrived at the toilet, he immediately answered the phone. The call was from Zhuang Yudi. After thinking about it, Zhuang Yudi decided to tell Bai Chen and the others about the ruins of the gods so that they could make a plan first. Hey, I said you haven't called me for a long time. I don't know what good news you called me today to bring you. After Zhuang Yudi heard Bai Chen's voice, her eyes were full of solemnity. The news I'm going to tell you next must be reported to Grandpa. All the senior leaders of our Dragon Kingdom must be informed of this matter. Do you hear it clearly? There was quite a bit of solemnity in Zhuang Yudi's words. At this time, Bai Chen didn't take this matter seriously at first, but when he heard what Zhuang Yudi said, his face also twisted slightly at that time, and then he spoke so leisurely. If you have anything to say, tell me first, and I'll listen to you whether it's worth alarming the people you're talking about. If it's really worth it, don't worry, I won't need you to tell me. Tell Grandpa what happened. After Zhuang Yudi heard what Bai Chen said, she raised her eyebrows slightly, and then said word by word, the ruins of the gods in the west have been opened. Bai Chen, who originally had a cynical expression on his face, suddenly became serious at this moment. At this moment, his expression also suddenly condensed, and there was a sense of complete surprise in the corners of his eyes and brows. "Are you sure you are not joking with me? You must know that this kind of joke is not funny at all." Zhuang Yudi heard that after Bai Chen said this, 3 black lines appeared on her forehead, and she was speechless for a while, and then she sighed leisurely. "You should know this kind of news. How could I joke with you? It's absolutely true, and there's absolutely no lie." At this moment, Bai Chen's eyes were quite solemn. At this moment, he half squinted his eyes and his brows seemed to be knitted together. "Okay, don't worry, I will definitely report all this to Grandpa, but I want to know when this ruins was opened." "About half a month ago." After Bai Chen heard what Zhuang Yudi said, he stood up with a bang. At this time, Bai Chen's breath was a little quick. "Zhuang Yudi, it took half a month for you to tell such important news." "Me, what do you mean? Don't forget whose family you are from." Zhuang Yudi's tone suddenly turned cold after hearing what Bai Chen said. "Let me tell you, I have separated from your Bai family a long time ago. I have done my best to tell you this alone. What's more, I am now in a foreign country. I couldn't believe the news at first. It's true, I just thought what that guy said was a joke." At this moment, there was a sneer on the corner of Bai Chen's mouth. "Interesting, it's really interesting. Now are you sure that this matter is true?" A hint of helplessness flashed through Zhuang Yudi's eyes, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "This matter has been confirmed to be true. I also went to that place specifically to take a look before. But on the periphery of this battlefield of gods, there is an extremely terrifying barrier. If there is no way to break through, I'm afraid I still can't get in." Zhuang Yudi just said it in a cold and unhurried voice. At this time, after Bai Chen heard what Zhuang Yudi said, he was also furious. There was a cold feeling in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Killing intent. "Asshole, do you know how many things have been delayed this time? I'm going to tell Grandpa now that we must send people to the ruins of the gods as soon as possible. If not, I'm afraid that many things in the West will overtake our Dragon Kingdom, and when that happens, the consequences will be unimaginable." Zhuang Yudi seemed to be too lazy to listen to Bai Chen's complaints, so she just hung up the phone. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 465. At this time, after Zhuang Yudi hung up the phone, a hint of helplessness flashed in her eyes. At this moment, a woman walked in slowly. The woman's eyes were fixed on Zhuang Yudi, and there was a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. There was quite a bit of joking in his eyes. "It seems that you have encountered something troublesome. Let me guess, is it because of the ruins of the gods?" Bao Si's eyes were staring straight at Zhuang Yudi, and there was a faint smile on the corner of her mouth, but there was a rather gloomy look in her eyes. At this time, after Zhuang Yudi heard what Bao Si said, a bit of vigilance flashed in her eyes, and her eyes were fixed on Bao Si. The two women were like this after their eyes met for a moment. Bao Si suddenly smiled. "Ha ha ha, it doesn't matter. Anyway, what you want to do has nothing to do with me. I'm not that guy like Lin Yu. You don't have to treat me as your enemy. I'll just pretend I don't know about this." At this time, Zhuang Yudi heard Bao Si, and after saying this, her eyes were fixed on Bao Si, and there was a faint smile on the corner of her mouth, and then she just nodded gently. "You are indeed a very smart woman, you should always know how to choose." After Bao Si heard Zhuang Yudi say this, there was just a sneer on the corner of her mouth. "Really? Then I really should thank you for the compliment." Zhuang Yudi just smiled. "You're welcome. You deserve such praise." The two people just looked at each other and smiled. Everything was unspoken, but each had their own thoughts, and no one could guess what the other was thinking. After waiting for a while, the two of them seemed to suddenly remember what it was, and then immediately turned their heads and glanced at Zhuang Yudi. Have you ever thought about something? After Zhuang Yudi heard what Bao Si said, she was slightly stunned. Then she turned her head, glanced at Bao Si, and raised her eyebrows slightly. What's the matter? Tell me. Look. Aren't you afraid of what to do if Lin Yu also knows about this matter? At this time, after Zhuang Yudi heard what Bao Si said, a meaningful smile suddenly appeared on the corner of her mouth. If I said this, he would have known about it. I don't know what you should think. At this time, after Bao Si heard what Zhuang Yudi said, a bit of surprise flashed in his eyes, and then his eyes were fixed on Zhuang Yudi. You said he knew it a long time ago. But why do I not believe it? Zhuang Yudi heard the praise, and after saying this, she just spread her hands slightly, with a bit of teasing in her eyes. Don't forget, no matter what, Lin Yu is also from the Dragon Kingdom. As the saying goes, 3 women make a play, but Zhuang Yudi and Bao Si, 2 women are enough to form a big play, but ordinary people may not be able to see it. After waiting for a while, Bao Si gently spread his hands, a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and then shook his head slightly. Well, now that the little guy already knows it, I have nothing more to say. It's all up to you. After Bao Si finished speaking, he walked straight out. At this time, Zhuang Yudi's eyes were fixed on Bao Si, with a rather solemn look in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. I'm afraid this woman is a little weird, but so what? Anyway, after this ruins of the gods are over, maybe there will be no intersection between us. At this time, Lin Yu and Evelyn were running madly towards the small village. After Su Yang and Su Weiner learned that their Dao beasts were so powerful, their confidence doubled. Great, sister, it seems that this white-browed old guy is no match for the two of us. If we take advantage of the victory and pursue the victory, we will definitely beat this old guy to pieces. At this time, when the white-browed corpse general heard what Su Yang said, he was furious and furious. His eyes were fixed on Su Yang's body, and in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows, full of a gloomy killing intent. Little guy, you are not old, but your tone is really not young. You are really not afraid of the wind blowing your tongue. At this time, after Su Yang heard what the white-browed corpse general said, the corners of his mouth also twitched into a sneer, and his eyes were full of ridicule. Really? Old guy, I don't know who it is. He was in such a mess just now and was beaten like that by 2 of us brothers and sisters. It's ridiculous to say it. You think so, old guy? When the white-browed corpse general heard what Su Yang said, an old guy was furious at that time. The white-browed corpse general's eyes were fixed on Su Yang's body, and an awe-inspiring killing intent erupted from the white-browed corpse general. It spread out like this. Boy, since you are so good at asking for death by not eating the toast but also the fine wine, then it would really be a bit unjustifiable if I don't help you today. The white eyebrow corpse general suddenly rushed towards Su Yang. At this time, the speed of the white eyebrow corpse general was extremely fast. In just one breath, he had already arrived in front of Su Yang. The white eyebrow corpse general at this time was different from before, because at this moment, there was suddenly a mace in his hand. The mace seemed to be made of human bones, and it exuded a black gas all over his body. The black gas gave people a sense of turbidity and made people feel a little restless. At this time, Su Yang's mind moved, and then the pure yang sky fire suddenly appeared in front of him, forming a shield directly in front of him. Su Yang's eyes were full of joy, and the face of the white eyebrow corpse general at this time began to look ugly. He had no idea that the pure yang sky fire would have such an effect. At this time, the white eyebrow corpse general's eyes were full of solemnity. I didn't expect these 2 young boys to be so strong. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chong. Chapter 466. At this time, Su Weiner and Su Yang were working very well together. The two of them just looked at each other. Su Weiner's thoughts moved, and then something suddenly appeared in his palm. A ball of Swanyan water. This Swanyan water suddenly floated towards the body of the white-browed corpse general. At this time, after seeing this scene, the white-browed corpse general's pupils suddenly enlarged, and the corners of his eyes and eyebrows were filled with a sense of surprise. He has seen the power of the Swanyan water before. Of course he knows that with his own strength, if he is contaminated with the Swanyan water, he will be crippled even if he is not dead. Once you really lose all your skills, it will be no different from the fish on the chopping board. When the white-browed corpse general thought of this, his figure suddenly retreated towards the back, and his speed was extremely fast. In the void, he could even faintly draw an after-image. Su Yang and Su Weiner never expected that just by relying on Lin Yu's words, they could actually point them to the current state of the city wall and have the power to fight against this corpse general. At this time, the two of them looked at each other, and then suddenly rushed towards the white-browed corpse general again. The two of them were extremely fast, just breathing and breathing. In a short time, he had already arrived in front of the white-browed corpse general. The two people suddenly started to operate their own skills, and then the spiritual power around them began to pour into their bodies like crazy. After waiting for a while, the two of them looked slightly pale, and there was a bit of solemnity in the corners of their eyes and brows, and then they looked at each other and frowned slightly. Strange, why is it like this? It's simply too strange. And at this moment, the white-browed corpse general seemed to have remembered something. After just a brief moment, he pulled away and backed away crazily. At this time, when the two of them saw the world of white-browed eyebrows, they seemed to have some understanding of themselves. Their fear may be due to the control of power, which makes them temporarily ignorant. So at this time, they were complacent and prepared to take advantage of the victory to pursue the white-browed corpse general, so they directly pursued him. At this time, the white-browed corpse general also had a slight sneer on his lips, and the corners of his eyes and brows were full of mockery. "You extremely stupid little guys, come here and chase me. The harder you chase me, the faster you will die." After the white-browed corpse general said this, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. The corners of his eyes and eyebrows were filled with a look of madness, and his whole person seemed to be completely crazy. After waiting for a moment, a turbid aura rushed towards him. When the white-browed corpse general felt this aura, his face suddenly condensed like this, and then he suddenly plopped like this. He knelt on the ground, his eyes and brows filled with a sense of respect. "Greetings to Lord Corpse King." At this time, Su Yang and Su Weiner saw the white-browed corpse general, who seemed to be kneeling before a statue. At this moment, Su Yang's lips curled up into a sneer, and then he slowly walked towards the white-browed corpse general. "It would be nice if you were like this." Su Yang slowly walked towards the white-browed corpse general, and his speed was not slow. At this time, Su Weiner seemed to have noticed some clues. Su Weiner's face suddenly condensed, and her eyes suddenly changed. "There is quite a bit of panic in it. Don't want." But before Su Weiner could say anything, a turbid breath suddenly came straight to Su Yang's chest. At this moment, Su Yang couldn't dodge, and was pushed away so hard by the breath. In the end, he fell straight to the ground, with a mouthful of blood spurting out of his mouth. Just one blow was enough to beat Su Yang into this state. At this moment, when the two brothers and sisters saw this scene, the corners of their eyes and brows were full of a kind of panic, and their brows seemed to be like as if they were screwed together. "How is this possible? How is this possible?" And at this moment, a man walked over slowly, and the corner of the man's mouth was even more sneered. At this time, they slowly raised their heads, and they found that the man in front of them was different from the ordinary man. There seems to be no difference between the people, except that their faces are a bit sickly pale. Other than that, they look just like ordinary people. The man walked towards the two brothers and sisters, with a faint smile on his lips and a look of ridicule in his eyes. "How is it? It tastes good." At this moment, after the white-browed corpse general saw the man like this, he instantly collapsed on the ground. At this time, after seeing the white-browed corpse general like this, the man just turned his head and glanced at the white-browed corpse general, and there was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. "What's wrong? I can't eat you. Why are you so afraid?" A layer of cold sweat appeared on the forehead of the white eyebrow corpse general, but at this time he just waved his hand and smiled. "Nothing, nothing, I am just impressed and shocked by your wisdom and bravery." At this moment, after hearing what the white eyebrow corpse general said, the man also stared at the white eyebrow corpse general with a smile on his face, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Although your words sound nice, you didn't do things well. Am I wrong?" The man's eyes were fixed on the white eyebrow corpse general, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and a few traces of mockery flashed in his eyes. At this time, a big bead of sweat appeared on the forehead of the white eyebrow corpse general, and his face became slightly pale. "Please, please spare my life, please spare my life." At this time, the man just smiled and waved his hand, and then he gently helped the white-browed corpse general up. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chong. Chapter 467. Don't be like this. I'm not the kind of unreasonable person. I also know that asking you to deal with these two little guys is really embarrassing for you. Although you are a great master craftsman, you are old. After the white-browed corpse general heard what the man said, a layer of dense cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His face instantly turned pale, and then he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful. Saliva. Sir, what do you mean?" The sneer at the corner of the man's mouth began to become more and more obvious, a gloomy look flashed in his eyes, and the killing intent on his body was even more awe-inspiring. "What do I mean? Of course I want you to rest forever." After the man finished speaking, he suddenly hit the head of the white-browed corpse general with his 5 fingers. At this time, the white-browed corpse general only felt a force on his head, as if it was being pulled out of thin air. Just like gone. The white-browed corpse general let out a miserable scream. No, sir, I have followed you for so many years, and I have worked hard without any merit. Please, sir, you are so generous, please let me go." After the man heard what the white-browed corpse general said, the corner of his mouth just twitched into a sneer, and then he waved his hand casually. "It's too late, it's completely over. If you don't die today, where should I put my face?" The man spoke unhurriedly, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious, and there was a bit of mockery in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. And at this moment, in just a brief moment, the white-browed corpse was completely sucked into a mummy by the man, and the bones on his body fell apart almost instantly. After the man saw the scene at this time, his eyes were quite gloomy, and then he waved his hand casually. "Since you want to die so much, you can't do it? You really can't explain it? After all, I am such a helpful person." The man just said this with a smile on his face. At this moment, Su Yang and Su Wainer took a few steps back subconsciously. They looked at the man warily, and there was a certain solemnity between their eyebrows. "The two of us may not be this guy's opponent. In my opinion, it's better for us to leave first." Su Wainer's voice suddenly sounded like this. At this time, Su Yang certainly understood what Su Wainer meant, so the others nodded gently. "No problem, the two of us should run first. The 36th strategy is to move. As long as we run fast enough, there is absolutely no way this guy will catch up with us." The two people's thoughts moved, and then they directly summon the Tau beast. It's just that the two of them have too little fighting experience, and they have no fighting spirit at all, and they have no intention of retreating. At this time, after the man saw this scene, a gloomy look flashed in his eyes. At this time, he half squinted his eyes, and then frowned slightly. It's interesting. It's really interesting. It's all about retreating. I didn't expect that the one I didn't fight would want to run away. It's really interesting. At this time, the man was talking unhurriedly, with a rather mocking look in his eyes, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. After waiting for this moment, Su Yang and Su Wan'er looked at each other, and then suddenly pulled back. The speed of the two of them was extremely fast. In just a moment, then they controlled their respective sword hands and retreated nearly 100 feet away. At this time, Su Yang and Su Wan'er just smiled. Although this guy is not weak, his speed is definitely not as fast as ours. I didn't expect that the speed of these two Dao beasts has reached such a speed. And at this moment, a voice suddenly remembered in their ears. Really? Are you sure I really can't catch up with you two? At this moment, when they saw the man standing not far away from them, their faces began to look ugly, and there was a look of disbelief in the corners of their eyes and eyebrows. How is it possible? How could you be so fast? This is absolutely impossible. At this time, the man just crossed his arms and then shook his head and smiled. Nothing is impossible. You think it is impossible, just because you are stupid. The person who hurt me comes to my place to cause trouble. If I ask you to leave so easily, where will my face be? The man just said this unhurriedly, with a bit of a sneer on the corner of his mouth, and a bit of mockery in his eyes. At this time, Su Yang and Su Wan'er looked at each other, with a cold look on their faces, and the murderous intent on their bodies became more awe-inspiring at this moment. Okay, since you insist on killing both of us, it would be really unjustifiable if I don't kill you this time. At this time, the Swanyanyan beast and the Chunyang Dao beast let out a low roar, which seemed to be quite intimidating. At this time, the man just glanced at the two beasts coldly, and a gloomy look flashed in his eyes, and a cold chill slowly emanated from his body. Little guy, if you two dare to scream again, do you believe that I will break every bone of yours with my own hands? At this time, the Swanyanyan beast and the Chunyang Dao beast were actually shocked by the man. The Swanyanyan beast and the Chunyang Dao beast trembled in front of the man. At this time, after seeing this scene, Su Yang and Su Wan'er also had a layer of dense cold sweat on their foreheads, and there was a bit of fear in the corners of their eyes and eyebrows. At this moment, the man suddenly took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the two of them. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 468. At this time, the terrifying coercion on the man attacked the two of them, and their faces suddenly turned pale. A fishy and unpleasant smell emanated from the man's body, and at this moment, the two of them began to look slightly ugly, and there was a bit of solemnity in the corners of their eyes and brows. After waiting for this moment, Su Yang and Su Wan'er's faces were ashen. At this time, their whole bodies were like falling into an ice cave. There was a kind of panic in the corners of their eyes and brows. The sense of fear began to become more and more obvious. At this moment, the two of them are trembling like this. You look at me and I look at the fear in your eyes. It is simply self-evident. You, who are you? What do you want to do? Su Yang and Su Wan'er were already a bit hysterical, and the man was just like this. The painting was like a ball of black energy surrounding them. The corner of the man's mouth evoked a bit of worry. Ruao's smile was full of mockery in his eyes. It's interesting, it's really interesting. You two have been chasing my man to death, and now that I'm feeding you, you want to ask me what happened? Don't you think you're a little ridiculous? The man spoke unhurriedly, with a faint smile on the corners of his mouth, and a mocking look in his eyes. At this time, Su Yang and Su Weiner felt a sense of fear in their hearts for no reason. At this time, Su Yang and Su Weiner felt that they were likely to die here this time. Su Yang and Su Weiner just looked at each other. You looked at me, I looked at you. After waiting for a while, Su Weiner seemed to have remembered something. Sir, you will never refuse to save us. You will definitely come to save the two of us. You will definitely do it. Su Weiner said in a cold voice, with a bit of determination in the corners of her eyes and brows. At this time, Su Yang nodded gently after hearing what Su Weiner said. Yes, I also believe that Sir will definitely come to save the two of us. At this time, after the man heard what the two of them said, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of mockery. At this time, his eyes were full of contempt and disdain. It's boring, it's really boring. I kind of want to see who the gentleman you are talking about is. I hope he will really come to save you, and not be like a turtle with his head shrinking. The man said this unhurriedly, and then he gently spread his hands and smiled. At this time, Su Yang and Su Weiner had a gloomy look in their eyes and brows. Don't worry, Mr. will be here soon, as long as you don't kneel down and beg for mercy and cry. Su Yang said coldly. After the man heard what Su Yang said, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a gloomy meaning. At this moment, the murderous intention in his body began to emerge. Boy, what did you just say? I didn't seem to hear something clearly. I'll give you a chance today. Tell me again. The man said in a cold voice, but the man's tone was quite unfair, and it looked like he must be angry. At this time, Su Yang still had a disapproving look on his face, and then he said in a cold voice, so what if I say so? What I mean is that you, a loser, will naturally wait until Mr. Lin comes. I'll beat you to pieces and kneel down to beg for mercy. After the man heard what Su Yang said, he also laughed. At this time, Su Yang felt that countless black energy turned into threads, moving towards his body bit by bit, and slowly holding it at this moment, a layer of dense cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and he let out a muffled hum. Su Yang clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. His face turned pale for a while, and his face was filled with a sense of unwillingness. How is it possible? Your strength. At this time, Su Yang paused, and there was a bit of gloominess in his eyes. And after waiting for this moment, a fierce and domineering force rushed towards him. That force swept across the sky, with overwhelming power, making people feel a sense of surrender. At this moment, after Su Yang saw this scene, he felt suddenly happy. Su Weiner seemed to feel the aura of Lin Yu's body. At this time, the corners of Su Weiner's eyes and brows were full of joy. Su Yang turned his head and glanced at Su Weiner, his tone even trembled slightly. It's Sir who's here. Let me just say it. Sir, he will definitely come. Sir, he will definitely come. At this time, Su Yang was even a little incoherent. The corner of Su Weiner's mouth also evoked a faint smile, her eyes were full of joy, and the joy on her face was even beyond words. At this moment, the man seemed to have sensed the aura emanating from Lin Yu. A gloomy look flashed through the man's eyes, and the murderous intent on his body was even more stern. A cold breath came over him, and that cold breath made people feel a little cold in their hearts. The temperature around him seemed to be several degrees lower at this time. A gloomy look flashed through Lin Yu's eyes. In just a moment, he had come to the man. The two stood opposite each other, staring at each other, but no one spoke first. Boy, I never thought that you would dare to come here. I really don't know who gave you the courage to do this. Are you tired of living? The man's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and a gloomy murderous intent spread from him. At this time, Lin Yu had a sneer at the corner of his mouth, and there was a bit of mockery in his eyes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji-Sheng Chang. Chapter 469. Ha ha ha, interesting, it's really interesting. These two people are my people, you have no right to deal with them. Lin Yu's mind moved, and then the time and space hand changed, and he appeared in front of Lin Yu. At this time, Lin Yu just pointed at Su Yang and Su Wan'er, and then the two of them appeared directly in front of Lin Yu. Lin Yu could certainly feel how terrifying the strength of the Corpse King in front of him was, but even so, he had to fight with it. At this time, Count Nicholas, after feeling Lin Yu's terrifying strength, his face sank slightly, his eyes stared at Lin Yu, and his face suddenly condensed. Boy, are you provoking me? At this time, Lin Yu suddenly laughed. He just spread his hands lightly, and then shook his head. No, I just took my people back. Is there any problem with this? Of course. After hearing what Count Nicholas said, Lin Yu suddenly laughed, his eyes were full of mockery, and then shook his head. Interesting, then you come and tell me, what's the problem with this? The two looked at each other, and after a while, Count Nicholas suddenly stood up and grabbed Lin Yu. Count Nicholas did not play by the rules and attacked directly, trying to get the upper hand. At this time, Su Yang and Su Wan'er, who were standing aside, saw this scene, and their faces suddenly condensed, because Count Nicholas was so fast that they couldn't even see Count Nicholas's movements clearly. But at this time, Lin Yu just slightly turned to the side, and then he dodged the attack of Count Nicholas. Then he stretched out his hand, used the power of the earth-splitting bear to strengthen his arm, grabbed Nicholas' wrist, and then swung it in a circle, and threw Count Nicholas out. Count Nicholas flew backwards in an instant, and finally fell heavily to the ground. It was just a moment, and Lin Yu appeared in front of Count Nicholas again in the next second. At this time, he also raised a few sneers at the corners of his mouth, and a little mockery flashed in his eyes. How is it? Is it comfortable? Lin Yu said slowly, and at this time he looked down from a high place, as if he was dominating the world. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the man suddenly got up, and then turned into a cannonball and rushed towards Lin Yu's chest. At this time, Lin Yu just wanted to dodge, but for some reason, he felt as if he was locked by that guy, and then he was hit hard in the chest by that man. In the end, Lin Yu sat on the ground, and his face flashed a bit of gloom at this time. After seeing this scene, Count Nicholas also sneered a bit. How is it? Is this taste comfortable? Count Nicholas' eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and there was a kind of mockery in his eyes and eyebrows. At this time, after hearing what Count Nicholas said, Lin Yu's face suddenly condensed, and then he took a step forward and swung his fist, hitting Count Nicholas's lower abdomen. The two of them just sat in meditation, and Su Yang and Su Wan'er, who were standing by, were slightly stunned after seeing this scene. The strength of the two of them should not be weak, but because the fight between the two of them and the street thugs looked no different at this time, but they could not see the clues. It was probably because they didn't punch, and the space around them was even faintly trembling and deformed. After a while, Lin Yu didn't say anything, and kicked Count Nicholas in the lower abdomen, and then he used this force to pull away from Count Nicholas. After the two of them pulled away from each other, Lin Yu's mind moved, and then the space-time beast transformed, and suddenly flew straight towards Count Nicholas. At this moment, the space-time beast controlled the space around Count Nicholas. A sneer appeared on the corner of Lin Yu's mouth, his eyes were fixed on Count Nicholas, and then he spread his hands and shook his head helplessly. I'm sorry, my dear Count Nicholas, you are afraid that you will die here today, I can only say sorry to you. After Lin Yu finished speaking, Count Nicholas felt an inexplicable squeeze, and blood oozed out of Count Nicholas' body at this time, but his blood was more red than that of ordinary people. After seeing this scene, Count Nicholas's face began to become slightly ugly, and at this time he began to struggle desperately to break free. Asshole, I didn't expect that there is a space-time beast. It's really powerful, but you don't seem to know what my innate skills are. Count Nicholas' expression became very painful at first, but after he finished speaking, his expression instantly became normal, and he spoke unhurriedly with a smile on his face. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. His expression suddenly froze, and there was a rather gloomy look in his eyes. What do you mean by this? Why did I not hear this, not understand? Lin Yu just spoke in a cold and unhurried voice. At this time, Count Nicholas was gently shaking the red wine glass in his hand, with a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Do you really not understand, or are you pretending to be confused with me here? Earl Nicholas spoke unhurriedly, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious, and his eyes were full of disdain. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chong. Chapter 470. Lin Yu couldn't figure out where the glass of red wine in Count Nicholas' hand came from. Moreover, when he looked at Count Nicholas, his expression was calm, and he didn't seem to be in any pain at all. At this time, Lin Yu was as confused as a monk in his second battle. His face sank slightly, and a look of confusion flashed in his eyes. It's strange. It's really strange. What is the purpose of this guy doing this? Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Count Nicholas. Count Nicholas also smiled at Lin Yu, and then glanced at him contemptuously. Little guy, I can only say that this world is different from what you see. Sometimes, you don't even know what is going on. Count Nicholas was talking like this unhurriedly, and at this time, after seeing this scene, Lin Yu's eyes and brows were full of mockery. Stop pretending to me here, I know exactly how capable you are. Since you like playing so much, then I will come and play with you. Lin Yu's tone began to become colder and colder. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he then had this thought in his mind, and in the next second he appeared above the space-time beast's head. The construction workers at this time seemed to be able to feel Lin Yu's anger at the moment. He just said softly, "Be careful, I always feel that this guy seems a little weird. Be careful and don't capsize in the gutter." After Lin Yu heard what the space-time beast said, he nodded slightly. A faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and a trace of amusement flashed in his eyes. It's interesting. It's really interesting. It's up to me to take care of this big guy's life today. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly jumped forward, and then the space-time beast launched the space-time tear here, but this time the space-time tear was more powerful than before. A lot. At this time, Count Nicholas let out a painful roar from his mouth, and then he collapsed directly to the ground, rolling his eyes back and forth, his brows full of pain. No, no. At this time, Count Nicholas was completely different from the calm and elegant look he had before. Even Lin Yu was full of curiosity at this time and couldn't figure out why he was like this. After waiting for a moment, Count Nicholas stood up again. He slowly walked towards Lin Yu, with a faint smile on his lips. Little guy, was that scene what you really wanted to see? But I want to say sorry to you. You can't see that scene. After Count Nicholas said this, he couldn't help but laugh so much, and then his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, with a kind of contempt in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Count Nicholas said, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and the murderous intention on his body quietly emerged, and a cold aura came out of it. It spread all over him. The cold aura gradually began to spread, and a gloomy feeling swept through everyone's hearts. The gloomy feeling made everyone involuntarily feel a bit of fear. After waiting for a while, the overwhelming chill swept through everyone's hearts, making everyone involuntarily aware of a feeling of panic. The feeling of fear gradually began to spread, and people began to feel an endless sense of panic. After waiting for a while, Lin Yu suddenly took a step forward. His speed was not slow, and he was in front of a person in almost an instant. After the man saw Lin Yu, his eyes were full of panic, and the feeling of panic in his body began to become gradually more obvious. Count Nicholas is indeed immune to time and space, and somewhat indifferent. But Count Nicholas felt a sense of fear about another power in Lin Yu, which was probably the aura of the white tiger. At this time, the white tiger seemed to smell the bloody smell of Count Nicholas. The white tiger's eyes were full of excitement. At this time, he began to let out a low roar, and then he spoke to Lin Yu in a leisurely manner. "Give it to me, give it to me." At this time, Bai Hu was even a little incoherent, and the corners of his eyes and brows were full of excitement. After waiting for a while, Count Nicholas seemed to remember something. "I remembered that my great-grandfather seemed to have said that in the distant ancient times of the Dragon Kingdom, there was an auspicious beast called the White Tiger. This auspicious beast called the White Tiger seemed to be an existence that could bring good luck to everyone. But this kind of guy seems to be the natural nemesis of vampires, because they like to devour evil things and can turn them into the power of holy light." When Nicholas thought of this, his pupils suddenly enlarged, and his eyes stared at Lin Yu, his brows seemed to be twisted together, and there was a look of disbelief in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. "How is this possible? Could it be that this little guy has a white tiger on him? This is absolutely impossible." When Nicholas thought of this, his eyes stared straight at Lin Yu, and his brows seemed to be twisted together. At this time, Lin Yu stared at Nicholas with a smile on his face. The voice of the white tiger sounded in Lin Yu's mind. "Little guy, hurry up, do what I say, you won't go wrong." Lin Yu half believed and half doubted, "But I don't have much spiritual power left. If I summon you, I'm afraid I will use up all my spiritual power. After all the spiritual power is used up, I'm afraid." Lin Yu knew that if this was the case, it would be no different from gamble everything.